Hi, MJ from FlippedNormals.com, and in today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to do a quick 10-minute studio setup for you to be able to light your characters, props, or whatever else you might want to present in maybe something like a showreel or just any type of gallery. So in my scene here, what I've done just to prepare, I have a character from our sort of stylized sculpting course that we did some time ago, and then just this simple backdrop here. It's really just a box that I've smoothed out a little bit just to create a little bit of a curve. This creates some really nice fall off for whatever shadows that might be cast from the character and onto the background. When creating a studio setup like this, there are really only like the three guiding principles that you have to follow, and those are the lights. So the kinds of lights that we'll be creating is going to be a key light, which is our main light, a fill light, which sort of adds some bounce of either color or extra light, and then a rim / a backlight that comes from behind the character to illuminate any smaller details and to really accentuate the silhouette. So let's just get started here with our first light. I'm going to be creating an area light. I mean, you can do this with a bunch of different kinds of lights. Area lights are nice because you can change the size of these lights and change how they affect the shadows. So what I'm going to do is I'll position our key light here. The function of the key light is this is our main sort of strong light. This is what's going to be illuminating most of the details of the character. And this is also what's going to set the mood for the type of scene that we're creating. So this slightly from above angled down light gives us, I think, the most versatility and the most clean type of scene look. You could, of course, also change the angle to be more head on. Gives us this spooky kind of flashlight effect, and that's also, you know, applicable for some situations. And you can even go further and angle it from below to give it a even spookier feel, maybe more of a dominant feel, especially like right now you can see my character or the camera is looking at the character from above. But if we change this so that the camera is looking from below up towards the character, combining that with a low key light, you can see how you can start to experiment with different kinds of feels or like emotions in the scenes, depending on your camera position or even light position. But for us, we are going to stick to a more basic setup where we place our light from above. And here you can then start to experiment with the angle, the intensity, and we're just going to start cranking this up a little bit. And one thing that you have to consider as well, again, it all depends on the mood that you're after. Obviously, we have a darker background here, so our shadows are going to be more forgiving. But if I can try to illustrate this by scaling down the light, you can see how we get more of a sunlight type of effect. It becomes more of a directional light, kind of like the sun would be because it's so far away. You can see how the shadows behind the character are extremely sharp. And that really changes the kind of look that you're getting in the scene. Now, for most, this could be really good for, you know, displaying hard surface details where you really want those hard, crisp shadows, because it really helps accentuates all the little nooks and crannies in your hard surface props, for example. But for most characters, I find that a nice, big, soft light like this really goes a long way because it helps you focus in on the character and not necessarily small little details here and there. So this is our main light. And to support that, let's just hit Shift D and we'll duplicate it and we'll take this is going to be our fill light and put it off to the side. Now the fill light is interesting because you can continue with a very neutral look where your lights are just pure white. But something I find really interesting with the fill light is that we can start playing around with some color And I think it was like the Florence Academy or something many, many years ago that started to experiment with this and sort of created the golden standard for how lights should behave in a studio setup like this. And what they found was that a soft, slightly tinted blue light from the side combined with maybe an orange rim light or backlight really gave a nice feel and a nice way to present your 3D models. And this wasn't just focused on 3D, obviously. It was also focused on real studio setups for clay sculptures and just sculptures in general. Something I like to do with the fill light is I like to make it as large as possible. Well, not as large as possible, but just fairly large, especially compared to our key light, to again not create any harsh shadows, which you can see here. Like the smaller I make it, down here we have some really harsh shadows now. Just make it large because that way it doesn't really dominate anything. And then I like to crank up the value of this. Maybe that's too much. So you can either play with the value or move it further away. And you can sort of see when you have a light here, you want to try to move it around to see where it catches the character in just the right way. And here we get a little bit of soft bluish tint on the side of the character, which again helps accentuate some of the form. And that's going to be our fill light for now. And I'll duplicate this as well to create our rim/backlight. And a rim light like this can be a little bit smaller. It can also be big, with the shadows. Again, always keep that in mind. I'm going to change this to be slightly tinted orange, but not too much. We want a warm feel to this. Okay. And one of the tricky things about the backlight here is that it also affects the background behind the character. So you gotta play around with this a little bit so you can see where it hits the background, where it's gonna hit the character. And then what I like to do, this is really, in the most simplest form, this is what we're after. And what I like to do is come in afterwards, after I've placed my lights just roughly, and I like to look at all the lights individually. So our fill light over here, now we can very clearly see what is it that we're getting from this fill light. Maybe we want to combine the fill light more with the key light like this, or we want it to be loaded like this in-between stage between a key and a rim light. So it acts more as a rim light, but from the side, for example. Makes it a little more subtle. Then let's take a look at the rim light here. Maybe we want to decrease the intensity of this. Move a little closer. And have it focus mainly on the top here and a little bit on the shoulders. I think that's nice. And you can see what we get in terms of shadow here. If you scale it down, really harsh shadows, scale it up even further, soft shadows, but also a larger reflection because the background or the backdrop I've created here is slightly reflective. Okay, and then we can sort of combine all those back into one, and this is what we're after, or this is what we get after that. So it's a really simple and effective way to light your characters. And now, of course, you can go in and experiment and say, hey, I don't want my key light to be completely neutral. Maybe I want something cold, something warm, or something creepy, really like, experiment. You can combine all these colors to figure out what exactly is the kind of look that you're after. Now, just a quick couple tips here. Something that I like to do, depending on the character, or depending on the type of mood that I'm trying to create, is sometimes I'll create a background light. So it'll be like a really large, typically an elongated light that'll sit high above and shine down a little bit, but behind the character. And its only function here really is to illuminate the background a little bit. So let's see here. And you can see how this lights up the background just a little bit. Like if we didn't want it this dark and wanted to make it more, like the color should be a little more consistent. You can see what kind of effect this has. This is a very harsh and a very dark setup when we just have the 3 lights. So this helps us create a little bit of extra bounce, and it's only really focused on the background. And the final little tip I want to give is for accentuating things on the back of the character with additional rim lights. In Blender, because there's no light linking, maybe in the future if you're watching this there is, but for now there's not. So what I like to do is duplicate my area light and then use a spotlight. And then what you can do is use that spotlight to really hone in on specific areas that you want to focus on in terms of you know, creating a rim. So for example, like this. This just focuses on this top part. You can display cone. This way you have a better feel for where your light is hitting. And you can combine this with the radius as well to, again, it's like with the area light, where this sort of functions as your sharpness or soft filter depending on the scale. So you could scale it up a little bit. There we go. Now it's going to be a little bit softer and hit a little bit wider. And that way you create this nice rim, but just on this part. And then we can turn our lights back on again and say maybe, okay, I want to up the intensity of this by, I don't know, to 2000. And that way we get a really strong rim from this light. And that's essentially my technique for creating, and not just really like a fast and efficient studio setup, but most studio light setups in general will follow these kinds of fundamental lighting techniques. Doesn't matter if it's for a lighting scene or if it's for a quick character like this. This is basically my process for it all. And that's essentially all you need to know. Now, if you want to see more videos like this in the future, make sure to leave a like and a comment down below. And also head over to FlippedNormals.com, where we have thousands of assets, tutorials, anything you really need to both speed up and level up your skill sets as an artist.